Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Welcome to Vox Novus, the new voice. If tomorrow you lost everything that you built, your home, your marriage, and your savings, how would you emerge from the chaos and start over again? My guest this week on Vox Novus, Dr. Lisa Nezneski, did just that. Dr. Lisa is a leading authority in the field of integrative medicine, bringing the benefits of traditional medicine, meditation, and alternative modalities in a well-rounded approach to health and healing. She's a certified mindfulness meditation teacher and a board-certified pharmacotherapist, professional healthcare consultant, botanical medicine specialist, Reiki Master, intuitive, author, and speaker. Her website is lisanezneski.com, and she joins me this week to share her path and book, Grounded in Chaos, Leaning into Adversity, Learning Joy. Please join me in welcoming to Vox Novus Dr. Lisa Nezneski. Welcome, Dr. Lisa.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Lisa, please share with us your path before the series of events that changed your life.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's pretty a raw emotional story, but I'll start with I was working a job where I was driving 120 miles a day, 60 miles to and fro. And I was the primary breadwinner. And in January of 2014, I was called down to the CFO's office. Now, I was a hospital administrator at that point. And so he was very gentle, explaining to me that my wages were garnished. Surprise, surprise. So it was a huge shock. I came to find out that we were getting audited by the IRS, and we owed them $32,000, some huge amount of money. So since they garnished the wages, we were able to appeal, but they put us on a payment plan. So I had a mortgage, I had a second mortgage, and then I had this payment to the IRS, which amounted to be a third mortgage, and I just couldn't handle it anymore, being the primary breadwinner. And I had that uncomfortable talk with the ex-husband and said that we had to sell our house because I just couldn't afford it. And so we did that. He wanted to move to Butler. Everybody knows Butler from summer of 2024, infamous Butler. But I said, no, if we're going to move anywhere, let's go somewhere with lower taxes and it's warm. So he suggested Wilmington, North Carolina, and I spent 4 years there? I believe so. I moved in the September of 2015. The house did sell. And at that point, I began to live in an 32-foot RV. And it was, moving from a 2,800 square foot house into a 300 square foot RV was miserable for me. My lifestyle was cut by, basically 90%. So I was functioning okay, but I hated it. And when we moved onto 10 acres of property, things only got worse. So at that point, I'm working full time. The nearest neighbor was maybe a football field away. I was pretty isolated. And he would, quote, go out to work every day, but I was basically by myself there. And so one morning I'm out walking the dog and I look down and I see this dinner plate size footprint in the sand. There was no grass. It was all sand around the house. So I see this footprint and I'm take a picture and I put my foot next to it just to measure size. It was enormous. It was much bigger than my foot. And when I went back in after the walk, there I just Googled just for fun, bear print. Well, yeah, sure enough, it was a bear print. And there I was out in the middle of nowhere with bears and poisonous snakes. And so things got pretty bad rapidly after that point because emotionally I didn't have any support. I was by myself. And that's the point where I said, enough is enough. So pretty much everything has changed in my life since 2015. I mean, my name has changed, where I live. Gosh, I think I moved 5 times since 2015 so this is the 6th move. And as I said, everything's different. I divorced and my last name changed back to my maiden name, which I'm never changing again, even though I did remarry. And the job that I had then, I left that job. I worked for a consulting company for about the last 10 years or so, which was much better suited than driving back and forth to Wheeling, West Virginia in the middle of the winter from Pittsburgh. So, but the thing about North Carolina was there's no real infrastructure compared with a big city like Pittsburgh. It's a great place to go and visit, and the beaches are nice. But I spent a year waiting out the divorce on North Topsail Beach. And that was very therapeutic for me. And I started to turn things around with virtually anything that I thought could help me heal. So I had some Reiki girls. I had a Reiki shaman. I had a psychiatrist, a therapist, attempted to eat better, but during that period of the divorce, I had lost probably 60 pounds, which was probably not healthy, losing it that quickly. So, I'm still struggling a bit with diet, but, things are much more calm right now. It was just such an intense period, we separated, and in North Carolina, you separate for 365 days plus 1 before you can file for divorce, which took an additional 90 days. So even though I separated on August 11th, the following year in December is when I was actually finally divorced. And in the interim, there was a lawsuit. The ex sued me. It was a baseless. In fact, the my attorney got it dismissed with prejudice, meaning he can't come after me again, which is reassuring. I haven't heard from him since, which is, we share 2 children, but we never, ever are in the same location at the same time. And I think my oldest son manages that so that he doesn't have the stress of both of us there at the same time. To me, I could see him or not. I saw him every day for 34 plus years, probably 38 years now that I think back. And, I'm a big girl. I certainly wouldn't start anything. We didn't start anything except for him with the lawsuit. But yeah, that was really difficult. It was a time period where I didn't feel grounded. So I began to really use a technique of grounding every single day so that I would have a clear mind while I was working. I mean, I really didn't want to lose my job at that point. I did a great deal of development with my career in those years. But again, what my rather straight-laced pharmacist cohorts would think is rather woo-woo things. I did Reiki, I meditated, I became a mindfulness meditation student and moved on to become a teacher. And all of those pieces, living by the beach, began to present a much clearer picture of what my true calling was during that time.
We're going to share more about your book, Grounded in Chaos. But before we do, your professional specialties include pharmacotherapy and integrative medicine. Please tell us about these practices and how they address the needs of patients.
Sure. Pharmacotherapist is a specialist that takes a board certification exam. And I originally was certified back in 1991. It's quite some time ago. So I think I actually sat for the very first board certification exam. And then, of course, you have to keep that up. But the idea is we are the most trained medication specialists for various conditions. There are since many specialties, subspecialties of that. You can become a cardiology specialist or an oncology specialist, but I like the generalist because at that point in my career, I was working in nursing homes where you get, a great deal of geriatric medicine, but the number of different basic medications that people in those nursing homes took were somewhat complicated. And I always considered myself the anti-drug pharmacist. I was trying to help people get off things if I saw what I considered to be side effects. And that actually became my greatest skill through that time, is to be able to sort out whether it's a new condition or a side effect of an existing medication. So I became actually really good at that. As far as integrative medicine goes, this is, I'll give you an abbreviated version of this. In the middle of all of that, it's in the late 90s, I opened a health food and vitamin store and became certified in integrative medicine, which means, looking at the individual as a whole, finding the root cause of their illness and not slapping a medication Band-Aid on it. So I really got excited about this when Dr. Andrew Weil wrote his first book, because I saw people began to use herbal medicines, but in ways that probably weren't safe. So I had pharmacognosy when I went through pharmacy school. So I had a depth of knowledge in plant-based medicine. So from that, I opened a consultative practice at my store. It was called Healthy Self, came from Heal Thyself, Healthy Self, and had a great deal of individual clients that would either come to the store or I'd make house calls. And that was what I felt was the most rewarding part of my career, is really helping people avoid medications, look at the root causes, and then help them with the skills that they would need to become healthy that are within their control. So that was a really fun part of my career. When I got here to Florida, I opened Healthy Mindful Self. It's an online store, but I also do consultations about medications as well, with that same philosophy of helping them find the processes that they can do on their own without a physician intervening. So it's, they don't need the physician to become healthier in looking at their diet, their exercise habits, their sleep, along with any other supplementation, natural supplements that may assist up to a point. Now, there is a point where, traditional medicine definitely has a role, and I don't have any problem with that. Surgeries, of course, antibiotics, things like that. But there are some lifestyle diseases like high cholesterol, being overweight, hypertension, things like that, where that people can make some changes on their own. So those are the two areas of my traditional medicine specialization.
Your book is entitled Grounded in Chaos, Leaning into Adversity, Learning Joy. What does the phrase grounded in chaos mean to you?
Well, the story about living in North Carolina, it was a tornado of emotions. And I had been the primary breadwinner for many years. And if mom didn't work, we didn't eat. So I spent many years stuffing. And when I was in this tornado of emotions, as you know, I was getting hit from all sides: financial, physical, um, emotional, relationship, spiritual, you name it, it was all going on at the same time. And so I felt like I needed to really hone in and ground myself several times a day. I was taught a grounding technique from Psychic Horizons School in Boulder, Colorado. There's one on the West Coast, but this is the one in Boulder, Colorado. And I found the techniques extremely helpful. And so I began taking a lot more classes from them. And the grounding part of it was you're sending energy down to the center of the earth and you're attaching your being to the center of the earth. And you feel the connection, the deep connection. I would walk on the beach barefoot. That's another grounding technique. And so through that tornado of emotions, I was able to let some of those go, process those by allowing them to leave my body through a grounding technique. So that's where the Grounded in Chaos came from as a title. It was a very emotional period in my life. It was I was basically blindsided by a lot of the events that were happening. And just when I thought something was a little bit under control, it was like those spinning plates. One would crash and I'd go back into this what do they call that? Disaster management, I guess. My life was a complete hot mess at that point. So the grounding techniques were very comforting to allow me to move forward with my life.
You shared many of the difficulties that you faced on your journey. Was there one that was the most difficult, and how did you navigate it?
Well, shortly before I took a new job when I was still at the hospital, I ended up in the emergency room, primarily because I was stuffing down those emotions. And what happened was my heart rate, well, no, let me back up. I had massive chest pains, and they were worse in the middle of the night. And I sat up and thought, oh my gosh, my grandmother died at a younger age than me from a cardiovascular disease. And I thought, oh yeah, the number one killer of women right now is heart disease. I need to get somebody to look at this chest pain. I'm giggling now, but it was serious as a heart attack, really. So I ended up in the emergency room at the University of Pittsburgh Presbyterian Medical Center, and they did a complete workup. And there I'm lying on the gurney in the emergency room, and my blood pressure was normal. My EKG was normal. My oxygen saturation was normal. And the room was filled with, residents and medical students and attendings and nurses and nursing students. I mean, the room was full because they wanted to figure out what was going on, and they were all trying to learn from my case. So I'm watching these chest pains, these squeezing chest pains, and I'm looking at the monitor and I'm seeing my heart rate drop. And I'm seeing that they're not seeing what I'm seeing. So I tell them, look at the monitor. And I get a bunch of blank faces. I see that they don't see my heart rate dropping. And I said, watch my heart rate, watch my pulse. And so as they do, they can see now I'm like at 38, and it drops to 36. When it got to 32, I turned and looked at the X and said, this could be it. I could be checking out. Tell the kids I love them and I don't want to miss my life. So that was the first time when I knew I needed to change things. So the job changed first. Of course, I lost the house after that and then moved. And went through the divorce. But that was the line in the sand that I knew that I needed to make major changes in my life. So it was my body telling me to really start to pay attention.
You had it right in front of your eyes, the warning signal.
I did.
As we said, the subtitle is Leaning into Adversity, which we just discussed, and then also Learning Joy. Can you share an example of an unexpected moment of joy that stood out for you?
There were many of them when I was walking on the beach. The interesting thing about living on the beach, I was actually on the intercoastal side, but there was one street. So there was either beachfront or intercoastal. But from my rental property, I could see both from the windows. There were tons of windows. Living at the beach helped me, with all the good ions, really process that. But the sunsets were more gorgeous than the sunrises. So I would look out over the intercoastal side facing west. And I remember there were many times I'd reach for my camera, but I remember standing on one of the 4 balconies that I had, looking out at the sunset and really being in awe. And it's humbling when you see nature in all its glory just in front of you, and you have to stop and you have to look and you have to enjoy. So since then, I've joined the Cloud Appreciation Society. In fact, I began to appreciate nature so much that I became a shaman, which is the use of nature in healing. So I really, really found that as being one of the pivotal moments in finding joy. And it shaped the direction of where I was going to go with my healing practice.
Absolutely. My guest, Dr. Lisa Nezneski, her book, Grounded in Chaos, Leaning into Adversity, Learning Joy. Dr. Lisa, please share with our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you and your work.
Yes, my website is my name, www.lisa, Lisa, Nezneski, November Echo Zulu, November Echo Samuel, Kilo India.com. And I also have my books available on Amazon and on healthymindfulself.com, which is my retail store, the online retail store. The next edition of Grounded in Chaos will also be available from Gotham Books, as well as independent bookstores and Amazon, of course.
And we'll be back with more of Dr. Lisa after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Dr. Lisa Nezneski. Her book, Grounded in Chaos, Leaning into Adversity and Learning Joy. Dr. Lisa, what role did mindfulness meditation play in your personal healing process?
Oh, gosh, it was huge. I mean, I was mentioning how I wasn't paying attention to my body. And one of the 3 basic anchors of mindfulness includes bodily sensations. So the other 2 are breath, paying attention to the breath, and ambient sounds. But I found the most benefit from paying attention to my body, where I had stuffed down emotions and not processed them. So it was a beginner's journey in meditation each time, because I wasn't really aware of these sensations. And in fact, I started taking some exercise classes at the same time and found that I could actually feel the tension in my body from, either sitting, and I call it mousing, working on the computer all day. And the tension during that time, because I didn't know what else would blindside me. And I am really bad at being blindsided. That's one of the learnings that I got through this, was that I don't like being blindsided. And so, but there are times when you need to actually let go of the control and let things happen, and look at it from a more mindful perspective. So being in the moment was so important in finding out how I was feeling, how I was processing the emotion, and then was there anything else that my body needed at that moment to be able to move beyond. And I still use a process like that. My Thursday night mindfulness meditation class from last week was exactly that. We went on a journey to find out where a nagging physical problem, the original emotion that was tied to it. And it was really fascinating for all of us in the group that we found things we didn't even think we were still carrying with us. So it was just fascinating.
I had a wonderful spiritual teacher who shared the expression, everything is unfolding in divine order. Your biography says that you believe that everything happens in its own right time. How may we see this in our lives?
Well, we all think that we have a plan. And I think I've heard God laughs when man plans. So, things don't work out as you plan. And I think the concept of things happening in their own right time is that we think we're in control of things, but we're not. And things work out to our advantage if we think about things that we're disappointed about, that didn't happen the way we planned, or any particular event where, maybe you missed the train, something simple like that, where you missed it because there was an accident on the train line that day, or something to that effect. You were spared some additional grief. So yes, you were put into some mild to moderate discomfort about that, being disappointed, but yet it all turned out for your good. So that's what I mean by everything happens in its own right time.
Reiki was life-changing for me in so many ways in the early 1990s. Please share with us how Reiki graced your life and what you experienced in the process.
When I worked at the hospital, where I was the hospital administrator, I was over the cancer centers. And I thought it would be wonderful as an adjunct therapy to bring in Reiki practitioners to help the patients. Well, I was summarily shot down from that. And I thought, wow, this is just a shame that they have these backward attitudes. But there were so many red flags in that job, not only driving 120 miles, but I did some more investigation and actually talked to the Reiki practitioner that I was bringing on board, although it did not happen. And I realized that this is an interesting process. It's more or less like a healing of hands-free. About 10 years prior to that, I had done some of the, I think it's Elizabeth Brennan, Hands of Light work. And this I felt was a continuation. So when I was dressed through that process, I brought different modalities of Reiki. I actually went through the training process and became what's it called? A master, Reiki Master.
Yes.
But my entire reason for doing it was to perform Reiki on myself and help some of the symptoms that I was having. There was a red flag here as well that were preventing me from working to my fullest, because if I didn't work, we didn't eat. So I began that Reiki process slowly over the years. Had a few treatments myself where someone else was giving me that. But when the tornado hit, I reached out almost immediately to one of the local Reiki practitioners. She had an associate. They were very young compared to me. They were in their 20s, early 20s. But I found such insight from each of them as I was going through. And then I had a Reiki shaman as well, who brought some of the shamanic techniques of breath and sand painting was her specialty. The training that I had wasn't necessarily like that. There is some of that, but my training was more of bringing more light into the body and finding those areas of dense energy. So it was a continuum. It was the Reiki, the hands of light, to the Reiki, to the mindfulness, and then on to the shamanic healing. So anything else I can add about that?
No, that's a wonderful share. And I had the blessing of the studying with and becoming friends with a wonderful woman by the name of Raven Keys, who basically developed medical Reiki mastery. And she actually opened the doors to hospitals here in New York for people to go in and practice. And it was just a wonderful thing. And you could think about, I don't know what year you're talking about in terms of trying to bring Reiki into the hospital that you were affiliated with. But this only happened within the last few years. So it's taken a long time to get traditional Western medicine to accept these alternative modalities in the hospital setting.
That is correct. That is correct. It was 2014, a little before that, 2013.
Absolutely. Yeah. Grounded in Chaos is written in the form of narrative poetry. What does that style mean to you?
I'm telling my story. And a lot of times it's not really rhyming poetry. It's as much short concepts, the way that I think, and put it into these stories, if you will. And to be honest, it started off as my journal. I had many of these short thoughts that I was writing down that was helping me process emotions. So as I was going through that, I actually wrote 7 mindful questions before I wrote Grounded in Chaos. However, when I sent some of the poetry to my editor, because 7 Mindful Questions was already with the editor, once I sent those poems, she's like, this has got to be published first. So I respected her opinion. She's a several book author herself. So that's how Grounded in Chaos was published first. But again, it wasn't meant to be a book per se. It started off as being this emotional journey where I began writing things down. And some of the longer poems, like the one that has to do with me walking on glass, that one was just for my own personal healing, recognizing where I had gone wrong. Why did I continue to do things that were to my detriment? So it was a lot of introspection at first. But then, as I said, I felt that if there are those out there who are also going through where every single thing in their life could be going wrong at the same time, then this book could potentially give them some hope that they can experience some of that raw emotion. And by vicariously experiencing my emotion, they can begin to process their own and then move on into the phases that I went through to find that joy.
And do you recommend that folks going through that do their own form of journaling?
Yes, yes, it's so therapeutic.
You also share backstories with some of your poetic chapters. What do these add to the offering?
Well, the poems stand on their own, but having some uh, perspective, some of where I was at that point in time. Uh, there's a word that I'm searching for that I'm escaping, but it gives you context, gives you some context into my thought processes when I wrote that and when I was experiencing those feelings.
And in those backstories, you're basically sharing a more grounded form of what you experienced that you share in the poetry.
No, thank you for that recognition. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. One of your narrative poems is entitled Luminous, and I truly resonated with that. Would you share that with our audience?
Yes, this is an award-winning poem. So in the second version, I tell you about how I received an award from the Toastmasters group. And when I read the poem to my ex-husband, he sort of did a meh. I'm not into poetry, but it was so profound to me. So that was one other, clearly disconnect on that part. But I was going to Wharton School. My company was sending me there for advanced leadership training, and I was super excited about this opportunity. So I was on an American Airlines flight, and I was going from Wilmington, North Carolina, up to Philadelphia, and being virtually Pennsylvania resident for 59 years of my life. I had flown into Philly many times, so I sort of knew what to expect along the way. But what happened is what you're going to hear now. Luminous. I flew through a cloud today, immersed in the light of heaven, white light above, below, and all around, reflecting. Immersed in the light of heaven. Turbulence. Turbulence wakes me from the reverie. The shaking proves that it is not solid, an illusory temporal experience of the light of the afterlife. And emerging from a cloud, a city appeared, placed down on terra firma. The destination is ahead. Billions of people scurrying around. What if they were all suddenly mindful and looked up to see the luminous light of heaven inside a cloud?
Beautiful. Thank you so much for
Thank
sharing
you.
that with us. Thank you. How does humor contribute to resilience in challenging circumstances?
Oh, yeah, you've got to keep amusement because life is too serious as it is. You've got to be able to laugh at yourself. You've got to be able to crack a few jokes. You've got to be able to take a few jokes. And by doing so, it lifts the seriousness of what you're going through to a higher vibration. Laughter is one of the higher vibrations. Love and gratitude are higher, with gratitude before love. So having a sense of humor is so important as things are happening to you that are completely out of your control. So being able to laugh at some of the aspects of it really keep you in a grounded but yet elevated energy state.
You have an offering called Two-Sentence Poem, and that's an example of humor. Please share that one with us.
Okay. My two-sentence poem. Honesty is like virginity. Once it's gone, there's no turning back.
I love that. My guest, Dr. Lisa Nezneski, her book, Grounded in Chaos, Leaning into Adversity, Learning Joy, will be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Times Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Hey, Dad, your prescription will be ready in just a minute. Hey, Dad, your laundry will be ready in just a minute. Dad, your lunch will be ready in just a minute.
Hey, honey, why don't you take a minute?
When you help care for a loved one, you give them as much time as you can, making sure they're safe and comfortable. But it's just as important that you take some time for yourself. At AARP, we can help with information and useful tips on how you can maintain a healthy life balance, care for your own physical and mental well-being, and manage the challenges of caring for a loved one. Because the better care you take of yourself, the better care you can provide for your loved one.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you.
You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides to support you and your loved one at aarp.org/caregiving. That's aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week, Dr. Lisa Nezneski, her book, Grounded in Chaos, Leaning into Adversity, Learning Joy. Dr. Lisa, I've been bringing through inspired poetry since I was a kid. Do you see your writing and poetry as inspired?
I do, from the literal meaning of inspired, which means to breathe in.
Yes.
It feels like I am breathing in these thoughts, that they may not actually be coming to me, but they're not my thoughts. They're coming to me per se, because I have set my intention to sort out some things. And they come through like Luminous did, in one complete poem in minutes, start to finish, no editing.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, yes, I absolutely believe that.
Each chapter seems like it plants the seeds for a meditation. Was this intentional?
Well, it's so much of who I am that I'm sharing bits and pieces of who I am, and that definitely includes meditation. So, was it intentional? I'm not really sure. Because, like I said, I'm telling my story and it's part of me. So the sharing, definitely. And I wanted to make sure that I told people how much it helped me.
Absolutely. Grounded in Chaos, as you had mentioned, was actually going to be your second book after 7 Mindful Questions. Tell us a little bit about 7 Mindful Questions.
Well, 7 Mindful Questions was the methodology that I developed to help myself through those stressful times so that I could stay on task and continue to work. And it's really quite straightforward, and it is relatively simple. I mean, it's the ABC pause and breathe CBA. So becoming aware of what you're thinking in that moment and what you're doing. And is there an underlying reason for it called because? That's the second question, has to do with that. And then, is what I'm doing right now really necessary? You're working through a process. You're aware of something, and then you're moving into why am I doing this? So that's the because part of it. And then, why do I care about this? That's the third question. The C is the care. So is this something that I really need to be doing? You know, we could be productively procrastinating, like cleaning out the junk drawer, doing something that's not really that important. But the fourth part, where we pause and breathe and think about what else you should be doing, that's where the breathing part of it is the meditation part that allows something better to come in. And that gives you a better perspective on what it is you really should be doing in that moment. So then you can choose what is essential. You know, let some of this junk drawer and other things that you're just killing time with, let them go by the wayside and really begin to focus. And the next is, what can I do better? Like, why am I still doing this? And why have I done this for so many times? What is the pattern behind this? Where, you know, choosing what's essential was the emotional heart of the 7 mindful questions, but moving on to what you can do better is really the strategic decision-making part, the change agent. And then finally, what is the best alternative for you at that point in time? So those are the 7 questions. And that methodology was so instrumental for me keeping on task that I expanded it to include specific meditations for each of those 7 questions. And I do have a workbook as well. The workbook was designed to stand on its own, but of course it's a companion workbook. So you can read one or the other, but using them both together, if you really know that you've hit that line in the sand where you're lying on the emergency room gurney and you know things have to change, that's where 7 mindful questions came in. So they sort of go hand in hand with, you know, I got to keep working. I got to stay on task. My head's kind of a mess at the moment. But then I began writing the poetry to get that emotion out of my body. So it was basically a 2-pronged healing using both of those approaches.
How may people learn to embrace change instead of fearing it?
That's a great question. I love that. And I'm going to tell my story of the manhole. So a guy is walking down the street. He's got his phone in his face, and boom, he falls down into a manhole. So the construction workers are all laughing at him. They go and they pull him out of the manhole, and he's so embarrassed that he just keeps going. He's, went right back to the phone. The next day, he's walking down the same street, and he falls in the manhole again. And the construction workers are just howling that this is so funny. He's, fell in twice. These Wall Street guys can walk down the street, but they, fall in holes. So, he's embarrassed. So the third day, he walks down. He still has his phone in front of him. He gets to the hole. He feels himself moving forward, but he did one of those catch his steps and moved back real quickly. And the guys are going, "Hey, buddy, you're finally starting to learn," and still giving him the what for. And by the fourth day, he decides he's going to put his phone away, and he finds himself walking around the hole. And by the fifth day, he decides he's going to walk down the opposite side of the street. So this is how change happens in our life. We start off repeating the same mistake, but making incremental changes as we go along until you make the final change where that situation cannot happen again. So you need to give yourself grace through that process where you're going to repeat the mistake, but you keep that strong intention that you're not going to. And eventually your behavior meets your intention. So give yourself some grace as you go through the change process.
Wonderful. Thank you. You've been quoted as saying, health doesn't always come from medicine. It comes from laughter and love. How may we fill that prescription?
Well, you don't go to the regular pharmacy for that because they're pretty serious people. Find something that you really enjoy, that you really love. Spending time with loved ones. I have the great honor of having 3 grandchildren. And those 3 grandkids are such a delight. I'll call my son and he's driving them to school. And you hear in the backseat, Grandma, they're all excited to talk to me. So it's wonderful. They live back in Pittsburgh. I live here. My grandson lives in Tucson. It's great to build that relationship, even though it's a long distance relationship. So that's the key to the love in my life. I also met a wonderful Marine ex-Marine, who is my now husband. And we just laugh at things all the time. He's got a great sense of humor, even when I'm having some really serious days. And I've made some more mistakes in the last year that I hate to admit, but I'm working on them. And he's behind me. I feel that positive energy of his support. So having support people in your life. I have a great friend, Pam, who lives in Akron, Ohio. We were taking a class from the group in Boulder, and I said to her, "You're from Pittsburgh, aren't you?" And she said, "How did you know?" I said, "Well, I know Pittsburghese just as well as anyone else." So I picked it out on just what she was saying, and we became fast friends from that. And so, building a new life, which is essentially what I did once I left North Carolina. I brought people into my life that we share common interests and we can support each other through the good and the bad times. And it's like I've leveled up in so many ways, but leading from your heart. The shamanic training is heart-centered. It was called Munai Ki, which means from the heart in the Karo language of Peru. And I'm finding living my life from the heart is really what fills that prescription for me. Absolutely.
What message would you like your readers to take away from Grounded in Chaos?
Okay. One of the main messages is that, I really felt alone through the process. And I want to make sure that people know that you are never alone. And even though you may be in a space where there are no other physical beings in your space, for me, it was my dog that was always with me through those early phases. But I have a deep spirituality that I felt, when I was so confused. I felt that phrase that the Holy Spirit can speak for you when you don't have the words, can pray for you when you don't have the words. So just be comfortable by knowing that you are supported in invisible ways by the Holy Spirit or your spirit guides. Your guardian angel can be one of those, where you have beings that want to help you, that are on the other side. So tuning into that spiritual foundation is really a key to help you get through whatever it is that you're going through in your life.
The wisdom of Dr. Lisa Nezneski, her book, Grounded in Chaos, Leaning into Adversity, Learning Joy. Dr. Lisa, one more time, please share with our listeners where they can get your books and find out all about you and your wonderful work.
My website is my name, www.lisanesneski, spelled, well, the typical way you'd spell Lisa, Lisa. And Nezneski is spelled November Echo Zulu, November Echo Samuel, Kilo India.com. And my website is chock full of information, including free meditations. I have a YouTube site with all of my meditations posted, all for free. And my store is www.healthymindfulself.com.
Dr. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this experience and this wonderful wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me, Victor.
And thank you for joining us on Vox Novus. I'm Victor, the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.